The sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow across the tangled trees along the riverbank. The water sparkled, flowing gracefully, but beneath its calm surface lay the tension of a coming storm. That day, everything seemed ordinary, but in a heartbeat, it would transform into something extraordinary. Leela, clutching her baby, was out for her daily walk. She loved the way the breeze danced through the leaves, how the river babbled a soothing melody. It was a routine she cherished, filled with laughter and joy. But today was different. Shadows loomed over the horizon, gathering like whispers of impending chaos. As Leela ventured deeper, the dirt path beneath her feet felt more like a tightrope than a stroll. She glanced down at her baby, Emma, nestled in a snug pink blanket, her tiny fingers curling around Leela's index finger. That connection, a spark of life and love, sustained Leela, especially today, when her heart was heavy with worry. Life had thrown challenges at her, sleepless nights, a recent separation, and the fear that loneliness would swallow her whole. But in this moment, with Emma cooing softly, everything seemed acceptable. "Look at the water, sweet girl," she whispered, pointing out the shimmering surface. But beauty can turn to horror in the blink of an eye. A sudden crack broke the stillness. The ground beneath her gave way, a steep drop to the river's edge. Panic surged through Leela, and she stumbled, desperately wrapping her arms around Emma. The world tilted as gravity took hold, pulling them both down into the icy embrace of the river. The shock of cold water hit her like a wall. Time fragmented into chaos, her heart raced, each thump echoing her fear. She held Emma close, shouting out against the roaring river, her voice swallowed by the rush. The water crashed around her, threatening to pull them under, to sweep them away into darkness. Across the bank, Mark had come to the river for his evening run. He was just another face in the crowd, someone lost in his own thoughts. The struggle of the day was still heavy on his shoulders, but each footfall on the ground was a step toward release. That's when he heard it, a muffled cry cutting through the hum of nature. Something instinctual kicked in. He turned, his heart racing as he spotted the Saita woman and a baby submerged, gasping for air among the churning waves. "Help!" Leela's voice pierced through the chaos, and Mark felt his own blood turn icy. Without a second thought, he launched himself into the water. Every stroke felt like a lifetime. He fought against the current, pushing with determination, his vision fixed on Leela and Emma, who bobbed like tiny buoys. In that moment, it didn't matter who he was. He was a man on a mission, compelled to save them, to be their anchor. Leela felt Mark's presence before she saw him. A sudden surge surged through her, hope, fierce and raw. She squeezed Emma tighter, drowning in panic but buoyed by the possibility that someone was coming. Mark struggled against the swift river, but he pressed on, water slicing against his skin. He reached them, just as limbs grew heavy with despair. Leela's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, yet the moment she saw him, a flicker of hope ignited within her. Mark shouted over the raging water. There was urgency in his voice that demanded obedience. Leela's grip was shaky, but instinct took over, and she extended her arm, a lifeline in the storm. The moment their skin touched was electric, a bond formed not just by desperation, but also by a shared understanding of fear and love. Mark pulled them closer, feeling Emma's soft body against him as he wrapped his other arm around Leela. He urged. Adrenaline washed over him, igniting every nerve as he summoned the strength to swim. With a powerful kick, he drove them toward the shore, each stroke an act of defiance against the thrashing water. Leela clung to him, gasping for breath, her eyes darting towards Emma, praying for her daughter's safety. Mark grunted, every muscle burning with effort. He glanced back to make sure the current wasn't dragging them back. Time felt elastic, every second stretched, the weight of the world submerged in the icy grip of water. But then, in one sweeping moment, they broke the surface. Air flooded Leela's lungs, sharp and invigorating. The shore was close, but the river still had its grip, pulling them in all directions. Mark fought against it, his body driven by an instinct deeper than mere survival. With one last surge of strength, he propelled them toward the edge, crashing against the muddy bank. Leela and Emma tumbled forward, Leela falling into the soft earth, gasping, shaking. Mark collapsed beside them, lungs burning, heart drumming like a war cry. A surreal silence followed, the tumult of the water now a distant roar. Leela stared at Emma, whose tiny eyes blinked back at her, wide and confused but alive. Relief washed over Leela like a gentle tide, tears mixing with the mud on her cheeks. Mark rasped, still catching his breath, eyes darting between mother and child. The sheer weight of their ordeal hung in the air, but he needed to hear the words of assurance. "Yes," Leela whispered, her voice breaking. The gratitude surged through her, filling her up until it threatened to spill over. She felt in that moment the bond of motherhood bind them all together. The lives of a woman, a child, and a stranger forever connected by this moment of darkness transformed into light. Mark felt a tug of something deeper, something that rushed beyond adrenaline. He lay there, breathless, trying to process everything. He had never been a hero. He was just an average guy running to clear his head, and yet here he was, carrying the remnants of life and near tragedy on his shoulders. Leela turned to him, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "You saved us," she managed, the words trembling on her lips. "I just did what anyone would do," Mark replied, trying to downplay the enormity of his actions, but in his heart, he felt the weight of the title bestowed upon him, like a mantle he never asked to wear. "Not everyone would have jumped in like that," Leela countered, and in that moment, an unspoken bond formed between them, a recognition of courage, of shared vulnerability beneath the crushing weight of survival. Mark found the strength to sit up, water dripping from his hair, his clothes heavy and sodden. "You're okay now," he assured her, scanning the rippling river behind them. The threat was receding, but the echoes of what just happened would resonate forever. "I don't know how to thank you," Leela continued, her gaze never wavering from him. Emma nestled in her arms, the rush of reality slowly fading into the background. Then it hit them. What they faced was not just the force of nature, but the fragility of life itself, the precarious nature of their existence. The moment had lengthened, expanded beyond the riverbank into something profound. "There's no need to thank me," Mark replied, his voice calmer now steady. He cracked a smile, lightening the weight of the moment. Leela chuckled softly, the tension slowly loosening its grip. "I promise," she said, swiping away the tears that mixed with the river mud on her cheeks. But as reality washed back drenched in the aftermath of survival, an unspoken understanding settled between them. This moment transcended gratitude. It was a reminder that life could change in an instant, that adversity could drive strangers together, transform them into something greater. As the sun dipped below the horizon, lending a soft glow to the river, they both gazed out at the swirling water, reflections dancing under the gathering night. Mark's heart swelled with an unfamiliar pride he had acted, and it mattered. Leela felt a flicker of hope bloom inside her. She had experienced something unfathomable but emerged, cradling her child with renewed strength. Neither would forget this day. The terror mingled with salvation. It carved a space for all three of them, encased in warmth, having braved the storm together and discovered the depths of life itself. And as the stars began to peek through the twilight, a quiet promise lingered in the air. In the darkest moments, we can find light within each other, unyielding and fierce, guiding us back home. The air was thick with warmth as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. On the banks of the Marlow River, tranquility hung like a delicate veil. People strolled by, chatting, laughing, completely unaware of the storm brewing just under the surface. For Leela, that day felt like a moment frozen in time, a brief escape from the chaos of her life. Cradled in her arms was her baby daughter, Emma, a bundle of joy with bright blue eyes and a laugh that melted the toughest hearts. Leela had taken this walk to find a semblance of peace. The gentle rustle of the leaves and the way the water glistened in the fading light made everything seem perfect. She whispered sweet nothings to Emma, feeling a swell of love that pushed away the burdens plaguing her mind-recent struggles, sleepless nights, and unsettling loneliness. Everything was quiet until it wasn't. A loud crash echoed from a nearby tree as it suddenly split under the pressure of decay, sending branches tumbling to the ground. Leela jumped, her heart racing. In an instant of distraction, the earth beneath her feet shifted. She felt a sudden lurch, a gut-wrenching moment where the ground just vanished from beneath her. She stumbled, instinctively pulling Emma closer to her chest. As if time slowed, she could feel the weight of gravity do its dreadful work. The world flipped upside down. She clutched Emma tightly, her heart pounding not just from fear, but from a fierce protective instinct. The cold river engulfed them, the icy water crashing against her skin, freezing every ounce of warmth. Leela gasped for breath, the shock nearly paralyzing her. The current was powerful, pulling them further into the depths, and all she could think of was Emma, her baby girl, so small, so innocent. Panic gripped her heart. She kicked desperately, trying to swim back to the surface, but the current was relentless. The weight of water became a cruel reminder that survival was not guaranteed. Surrounding them, the water roared like a beast, eager to pull them down into its cold reach. For every thump of Leela's heart, fear intertwined with despair. "Help!" she screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the furious water. Leela's lungs burned as she fought against the inevitable pull of the river. Instinctively, she wrapped her arms tightly around Emma, holding her close, not only to shield her from the biting cold, but to fortify her own resolve. Across the riverbank, Mark was out for his usual evening run, a personal ritual that grounded him after long hails at work. He felt the rhythm of the earth beneath his feet, the sound of nature surrounding him. But then something shattered the tranquility, a desperate cry that cut through the normalcy like a knife. Turning sharply towards the frantic voice, Mark caught sight of her, a woman struggling to stay afloat, clutching a baby, their forms bobbing helplessly in the wild water. His heart dropped. His instincts kicked in without hesitation. He lunged toward the edge, preparing to dive in. "Hold on," he shouted, the words rolling off his tongue like a battle cry. With the urgency of unbridled adrenaline, he plunged into the icy chaos. The initial shock cut through him like 1,000 daggers. The cold wrapped around Mark, each stroke pushing against the furious current and the weight of his own fears. The river thrashed, angry and wild, yet he pressed on, determined to reach them. His mind raced. What if he couldn't get to them in time? What if they were already lost? With every stroke, he powered through the water, thoughts of heroism melting away, replaced by sheer survival. When he was close enough to grab hold of Leela, he could see her panic-stricken face, the desperation in her eyes. In that split second, clarity struck him. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about preserving love, innocence, and hope. Mark yelled, his voice breaking through the chaos, cutting through the water's roar. Leela's eyes widened, and for a moment, doubt flickered across her face. She was afraid, but instinct told her to trust this stranger. With effort, she extended her arm, feeling the pulse of survival coursing through their connection. Mark grasped her wrist, his grip firm yet compassionate, while he wrapped an arm securely around Emma. Together, they formed a lifeline, clinging to one another as the water fought relentlessly against them. "Just hold on to me," Mark reassured them both, energy coursing through him as he began to swim for the shore. His muscles burned with exertion, each stroke a testament to his will. He felt Leela's fear washing over him, and it fueled his determination. The moment felt surreal, adrenaline surged, time felt elastic, fears evaporating into the water surrounding them. This was a fight for survival, and he refused to lose. Leela clung to Mark with newfound resolve, each gasp for breath a reminder of how precious life was. She looked down at Emma, still cradled in her arms. Though the baby's eyes were wide with shock, her tiny fingers found a firm grip on Mark's shirt, a silent testament of faith. As they neared the riverbank, it seemed to recede into the distance, but Mark pressed on, his body wading through the torrent, refusing to falter. He could feel the weight of Leela's grief and desperation anchoring them, but something else shimmering just above the surface hope. With one final push, he reached the bank where solid ground met relentless waves. The exhaustion rang through him like a bell tolling, but he heaved himself and them both onto the muddy shore, collapsing onto the ground. Leela fell beside him, the weight of their terrifying ordeal finally unraveling. Gasping for air, she pulled Emma close, pressing kisses against her forehead, tears spilling unchecked down her cheeks. "You're okay, baby," she whispered with trembling relief. Mark lay there, breathless, chest heaving like a bellows. He turned to see them both alive, both okay. The pure joy and relief washing over him filled a space in his heart he didn't know was empty. "You both made it," he managed to say, trying to catch his breath. The reality of their survival settled around them like a warm blanket, breaking through the chill. Leela looked up at Mark, the gratitude in her eyes radiating from her very soul. "I don't know how to thank you," she stammered, disbelief washing over her, gratitude bubbling to the surface, almost overwhelming. Mark waved a hand dismissively, but his heart swelled with something profound. "You don't need to thank me." But deep down, he began to understand that not everyone would act in the face of danger, most would stand witness, paralyzed by fear. Yet here they were, grounded in a bond forged by chaos. Leela couldn't take her eyes off him. He was just an average guy, caught in a moment that would forever change their lives. "You saved us," she insisted, her voice steadying. The river behind them, once a source of fear, now whispered a promise of new beginnings. They were survivors, and woven into the fabric of their lives was a knotted thread of connection. Mark offered her a smile, the tension in his body loosening, revealing the joy that comes only after facing deep trials. He asked, glancing down at Emma, whose tiny body was still tucked safely against Leela. "She's perfect," Leela beamed, brushing her hair from Emma's face. They both shared a bittersweet laugh, emotions cascading through them like waves. The warmth of survival enveloped them, a stark contrast to the starkness of their recent encounter with death. As they lay there, a strange understanding settled around the three of them. They were bound now by this shared moment, a realization that life could change in an instant. Mark felt the gravity of that truth weighing on him, and Leela knew it too. What lay ahead was uncertain, a journey wrapped in mystery. But today they learned something invaluable. In moments of darkness, light could be found in each other, in limitless courage, in love, and in the instinct to fight for life. In the fading day, with the sun melting into twilight, they found comfort in each other's presence. They sat together on that muddy bank, watching as the river continued to flow, fierce yet unyielding. It whispered tales of those who dared to venture, who encountered the depths, and emerged not just as survivors, but as something more. And as the stars began to twinkle above, the silence was filled with unspoken promises. They had faced a storm together and become stronger for it. Life would carry them on, but in this moment, they were a part of something monumental, brought together by fate, held firmly by hope, and forever changed. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the shimmering surface of the river. It looked inviting, peaceful, almost like a mirror reflecting the endless possibilities of a summer day. But that tranquility was about to be shattered by a moment that would be seared into memory forever. Leela stood on the riverbank, her baby Emma cradled in her arms. The faint sounds of laughter from nearby picnics and splashes from children playing were all but drowned out by the rush of the water. She breathed in deep, the fresh air filling her lungs. It was supposed to be a day of solace, but lately, solace had been hard to come by. Life had thrown its share of challenges her way, a recent divorce, sleepless nights, and the weight of single motherhood pressing down on her like an anchor. The river had always been a refuge, a place she could come to collect her thoughts. Today, she had hoped for a moment of peace, just a break from the storm swirling in her mind. As she wandered closer to the water's edge, she pointed out the bubbles dancing on the surface, hoping to distract Emma, whose wide blue eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Look, sweetheart," Leela cooed, smiling down. She felt a fresh wave of love wash over her, blanketing her with warmth amidst the chaos. But just as she took a few steps closer, the ground beneath her shifted. She felt a sickening lurch as the earth crumbled away. Instinct kicked in, and she reached out, desperately wrapping her arms around Emma. But gravity had a different plan. Both of them tumbled into the frigid embrace of the river. Cold water rushed over them, pulling them under. Panic surged through Leela. She gasped, fear gripping her heart. Emma was so small and helpless. "No," she screamed, choking on the icy water that enveloped them. Desperation clawed at her. She could feel the current dragging them deeper. Her instincts screamed for survival, but all she could think about was Emma. Leela fought to keep her baby's head above water, feeling the sheer weight of despair crashing over her. The roar of the river drowned out her cries, and in that moment, she feared that hope was slipping away. Meanwhile, Mark was out for his evening run along the riverbank, letting the rhythm of nature settle the stress of his day. He thrived on the solitude, the quiet, But suddenly something pierced the peaceful facade, a frantic scream echoing through the air. He stopped running, heart racing, and scanned the water. He spotted them, two tiny figures struggling against the overwhelming current. Panic shot through him. Without a second thought, he plunged into the river, the cold water shocking his senses. He didn't hesitate, the urgency of the moment eclipsed everything else. "Hold on," Mark shouted, pushing himself through the powerful current. Every stroke felt like a battle against an unseen enemy. He felt the splash of water against his skin, the cold serving as a harsh reminder of the stakes involved. He had to reach them. He had to save them. Time stretched and twisted like the river itself. For Leela, every second felt eternal as she fought to keep Emma above water. She was gasping for air, vulnerability mixed with a fierce love tightening her chest. But suddenly, amidst the madness, Mark appeared like a beacon of hope. He swam toward them with determination, muscles straining against the fierce pull of the river. Leela's heart flickered with the slightest hint of hope. She could see him clearly now, cutting through the water, an ordinary man transformed into a lifeline. Mark yelled, urgency echoing in his voice. This was the moment. With a surge of adrenaline, Leela stretched out her arm, feeling the brave pulse of survival surge through her. Mark grasped her wrist firmly, his grip anchoring her in reality. Then he wrapped his other arm around Emma, pulling her close to his chest. In that moment, they formed a fragile but resilient unit against the rushing waters around them. "Just hold on to me," Mark shouted, focus shifting entirely to them. Fueled by raw determination, he propelled them toward the shore, forcing his body to work harder than ever. Each stroke felt monumental. The fear that held Leela captive slowly began to dissolve into something new, an unyielding will to survive. She clung to Mark, her heart racing not just with fear but with the primal instinct to protect her child. As they neared the bank, the current grew furious, swirling with menace. Mark pushed against it, sweat mingling with river water, every muscle in his body straining against the pull. But he could feel their grip on life morphing into something stronger, a connection forged through sheer desperation. Gasping, Leela looked down at Emma, whose wide eyes mirrored the chaos surrounding them. "You're okay, baby." Tears mixed with water as relief flooded her soul. Even in the throes of danger, this fierce bond gave her strength. With one last burst of energy, Mark heaved them up onto the muddy bank, collapsing alongside Leela as they finally escaped the river's grasp. They tumbled onto solid ground, the chaos fading as silence settled around them, broken only by their heavy breaths. Leela cradled Emma against her chest, relief washing over her like a gentle wave. She squeezed the baby tightly, heart swelling with gratitude and love. "We made it," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks, realizing how close they had come to losing everything. Mark lay back on the ground, panting hard, feeling the weight of their relief settle into his bones. He rolled onto his side, staring at them alive, unbroken. "You both are okay," he breathed, an incredulous smile breaking through the exhaustion. Leela finally met his gaze, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, unable to find words to express her gratitude. "You saved us." "I don't know how I can thank you," she said, voice trembling, overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. Mark shrugged lightly, still catching his breath, but he felt a spark of something bigger than himself. "I just did what had to be done," he replied, but deep down he knew this was more than just instinct. It was a profound shift in purpose, a defining moment that would alter everything about how he saw himself. As they lay there, evidence of pursuit and survival etched in mud and water, Mark glanced at the river. It flowed steadily, beautiful yet unpredictable. He felt a connection binding them, though they were mere strangers moments ago. Their lives had collided in a way that transcended explanation and unspoken agreement to fight for life and hope. Leela watched the river, memories of panic still fresh, but for the first time that day, the water appeared different. It shimmered, reflecting the historic bond they now shared. "I thought I'd lost her," she whispered, more to herself than to Mark. "Not on my watch," Mark replied, voice steady, and they both smiled softly. Each heartbeat echoed a promise to embrace life, to cherish their loved ones, and to remember that sometimes, in the face of darkness, unexpected heroes step forward. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the river, they shared an unspoken understanding. In that moment, they were entwined in something greater than the sum of their fears. They had faced the storm and come out stronger on the other side. Leela cradled Emma, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest. She realized she would never take another moment for granted. Each breath, each second, held immeasurable worth. She glanced at Mark, a stranger who had transformed into a hero, and found herself grateful for the unexplainable bond they formed in such peril. Mark met her gaze, something flickering between them, a recognition of shared experiences that transcended their brief encounter. He had entered the river to save a mother and her child, but emerged with so much more. He had discovered the power of human connection in its rawest form. Moments stretched into minutes as the weight of survival settled around them. As the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, they each found strength in the reality that life could change in an instant. They had faced fear and triumph together, now intertwined through a shared narrative of bravery and hope. In the distance, the river continued to flow, a reminder of life's unpredictability, the dance of joy intermingled with peril. And there on the mud-stained bank, hearts once heavy with fear now radiated the promise of new beginnings. Leela, Emma, and Mark were no longer just individuals. They were woven together in a tapestry of resilience, bound by the fierce currents of love. And as night fell, enveloping them in soft darkness, the warmth of gratitude shimmered like the stars above, crafting a story that would forever echo in their hearts, one of courage, connection, and the unmistakable power of love. The sun hung low, casting a warm golden hue over the peaceful river. Its surface glistened like diamonds, inviting anyone who passed by to dip their toes in its gentle flow. But on that day, the river held a far darker tale, one that stretched the boundaries of fear, courage, and an unexpected bond between a mother and a stranger. Leela stood at the riverbank, cradling her baby Emma in her arms, feeling the comforting weight of her daughter nestled against her chest. The sounds of laughter drifted in from a nearby picnic, families enjoying the summer day, kids splashing merrily in the shallows. Leela's heart ached with longing, and she sought solace in the beauty surrounding her, a brief escape from the struggles that had been her life for the past few months. The separation from her husband had left her feeling lost, her mind often swirling with worries about the future. But in the embrace of the river, she found a moment of peace and clarity. "Look, Emma," she said softly, tilting her head, pointing toward the water's surface. Emma gazed up at her mother, tiny fingers grasping a few strands of Leela's hair. For a moment, the weight of Leela's troubles melted away. She breathed deeply, inhaling the scent of wildflowers and damp earth, letting nature weave its magic around her. But in an unexpected moment, tranquility gave way to chaos. The ground shifted beneath Leela's feet, a loose patch of soil crumbled, and before she could process what was happening, she lurched forward. The world tilted dangerously, and with a scream caught in her throat, she instinctively tightened her grip on Emma. Together, they tumbled into the icy embrace of the river. A cold shock jolted through Leela, swallowing her breath. The water roared like a beast, dragging them under. She fought to regain her senses, heart pounding in her chest as panic surged through her veins. Emma, she clutched her baby girl tight, desperately trying to keep her head above the surface, the raging current relentless. "Help!" Leela gasped, her voice muffled, the water rushing into her mouth. The roar of the river drowned out her cries, and in that suffocating moment, despair clawed at her insides. Not far from the chaos unfolding, Mark was out for his evening jog along the scenic path that traced the riverbank. Lost in his thoughts, he found solace in the rhythm of his feet pounding the earth, the scenery a beautiful blur. But that peace shattered as a frantic scream pierced the air, snapping him back to reality. His heart raced as he scanned the river, and horror washed over him when he spotted Leela and Emma, both struggling beneath the turbulent water. There was no time to think, only instinct. He said aloud, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. With his heart pounding like a drum, Mark dashed toward the river's edge and jumped into the frigid water. It enveloped him, shocking his senses, but he didn't hesitate. Every stroke felt heavy, the water pulling him in different directions, fierce and unrelenting. He shouted, pushing through the current, feeling every muscle in his body strain against the icy grip of the river. With determination coursing through him, Mark focused on reaching them, propelling himself forward, fighting against every ounce of fear he felt. Time stretched, every second pulling taut as Leela struggled against the water's fury. She could barely breathe, each gasp drawing in cold water that threatened to drag her deeper. Above all, she fought to keep Emma safe. Cradling her daughter, she could feel the baby's warmth, and in her heart soared the fierce instinct to protect. But the current was merciless. Leela's strength was waning, the cold slowly stealing her energy. That's when Mark finally reached them. His heart surged with hope as he spotted Leela fighting to keep herself and Emma alive. Mark shouted, urgency lacing his voice. Leela's eyes met his, panic and desperation battling with the flicker of hope igniting within her. She stretched out a trembling hand, feeling a surge of connection as Mark's fingers locked around her wrist. With his other arm, he wrapped around Emma, pulling the baby close, cradling her against his chest. He shouted, his voice echoing above the sound of rushing water. Leela nodded, gripping him fiercely. It was as if time slowed in that moment, their connection pulsing with the energy of survival. Mark kicked toward the surface, every stroke a desperate attempt to escape the clutches of the river. With Leela's gaze fixed on him, hope became their lifeline. He could feel their combined weight, the tension of survival anchoring them together. It was a moment suspended in time, where fear turned into fierce willpower. Leela felt the chill of the water mixing with the heat of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She fought against the current, every ounce of her being now focused on getting Emma to safety. The world above, the laughing families, the picnics, it all faded away. It was just her, Emma, and the man pulling them through the waves. Mark fought tirelessly, knowing they were so close to the riverbank. He could feel his muscles screaming in protest, begging him to give in, but he ignored the pain. He urged, determination boiling inside him like a volcano. With each kick, each stroke, he thought of all that was on the line: this mother, this baby, their very lives. Finally, they broke the surface, gasping for air. Leela coughed, water spewed from her lungs as she took in the sweet, crisp air. But they weren't safe yet. Mark continued to swim, every ounce of energy focused on reaching solid ground. He pushed through the water, eyes set on the muddy bank ahead. And then, with one final push of will, he propelled them onto the shore. They collapsed, gasping, Leela cradling Emma close as they tumbled out of the water, breathless and wide-eyed. Mark fell beside them, exhaustion weighing him down, yet relief flooded over him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Tears streamed down Leela's face as she clutched Emma, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her baby's chest. "We made it," she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and gratitude. In that moment, she realized how close they had come to losing everything. Mark lay there, chest heaving, watching them both alive, unbroken. Leela's eyes met his, filled with gratitude that spilled over like a fountain. "You saved us," she managed to say, awestruck by what had just transpired. "Just doing what needed to be done," Mark replied, but deep inside he felt an unfamiliar swell of emotion. He had turned from an ordinary man into a hero, even if just for a fleeting moment, and for the first time he understood the true weight of courage. As they sat on the muddy bank, gasping for breath, the world around them slowly began to come back into focus. The distant sounds of children playing and the laughter of families picnicking emerged once again, but now they felt like echoes of a life Leela had almost lost. "Thank you," she said, completely shaken yet grounded by the reality that they had survived an unimaginable ordeal. Emma nestled against her, the warmth of life a sweet reminder of hope. Mark offered a soft smile, the kind that held the strength of survival, and the bond formed in an instant of chaos. It was nothing short of a miracle, he thought, reflecting on his own thoughts of who he was becoming. What they didn't know was that moments like these create deeper connections than any shared history, more profound than any spoken word. In a world where chaos often reigns, their lives had intertwined in a beautiful, poignant way, a testament to the strength of the human heart. And as the sun dipped lower in the horizon, it cast everything in a soft, golden light, illuminating them three souls forever tied by their shared moment of fear and survival. Leela looked at Emma, marveling at the small fingers curling around her own. "You're so brave," she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks, reminding her that life was fragile yet beautiful. Mark watched the bond between mother and child, feeling something shift within him. The day had changed him, woken him up in ways he never knew he needed. He was not just a man who ran to escape. He was a guardian when it mattered. What followed was a moment suspended in eternity, filled with gratitude, relief, and an unspoken understanding. They had fought together, emerged from chaos, and life moved on around them unchanged, yet forever altered. As the stars began to twinkle against the velvet sky, Leela, Emma, and Mark shared a newfound connection, one that transcended words, built on fear transformed into courage. Life would go on. Perhaps the scars would remain, but within those scars, there would also be a flicker of light. And in the profound quiet of that riverside, as they embraced the dawn of a new day, they stepped into all that was to come, knowing that sometimes, out of chaos, extraordinary connections are forged, anchoring hearts together long after the river has receded. The sun lit up the river, casting sparkles on the water that danced like diamonds. It was a picture-perfect day, an idyllic moment, a day meant for laughter and joy. But on that same riverbank, a storm was brewing, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash chaos. Leela stood at the water's edge, cradling her baby Emma against her chest. The gentle lull of the river's flow lulled her into a false sense of security. She had come to this sanctuary, searching for a brief escape from the burdens of life. Her marriage had fallen apart. The weight of single motherhood pressed her down, and in the soothing sound of the river, she hoped to find some peace. As she carefully maneuvered the uneven ground, she pointed at the shimmering water. "Look at it, Emma." Emma cooed, her little fingers reaching out, grasping the air as if trying to catch the rays of sunlight. In that instant, Leela felt her heart swell with love, but a whisper of fear crept in. The world was unpredictable. She had learned that the hard way. Just as she shifted her weight, the ground collapsed beneath her feet. It happened in an instant. The loose soil crumbled like a house of cards, and before she could react, Leela stumbled into the river, the icy grip of the water swallowing her whole. Panic surged through her like a tidal wave as she fell, clutching Emma tightly to her chest. The cold water took her breath away, wrapping around her like a cloak of terror. Instinct kicked in. She fought to keep Emma's head above the surface as they both floundered in the icy depths. "Help!" Her voice echoed as the current roared around them, drowning out her cries. Leela kicked desperately, but every effort felt futile against the raging water that threatened to pull them under. Emma squirmed in her arms, tiny cries reaching her ears, adding to Leela's growing fear. Across the riverbank, Mark was enjoying his evening jog, a ritual that allowed his mind to clear from the week's chaos. The rhythmic pounding of his feet against the earth was a comfort, the fresh air brushing against his skin a sweet relief. But his world shattered as he heard a piercing scream tear through the tranquility. His heart hammered in his chest as he pivoted toward the sound. In an instant, he spotted Leela and Emma disappearing into the churning river. Time froze, his thoughts racing as adrenaline surged through his body. Without a second thought, he dove into the water, the icy shock jolting him awake. Mark shouted, propelling himself toward them, each stroke a desperate attempt to reach the struggle unfolding before him. The water was frigid and relentless, pulling at his legs, but he dismissed the cold as he focused on the task at hand. There was no room for fear, only determination. Leela thrashed in the water, trying to keep Emma calm, but her limbs grew heavy, the strength draining from her body. The terror of the situation was escalating. She looked around, desperately searching for a lifeline, wondering if this was how her world was going to end. But then she saw him, a silhouette struggling through the waves. Mark's strong strokes pushed him closer, his face a mask of focus and urgency. As he reached them, Leela felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Mark shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. In that moment, Leela's instincts took over. She extended her hand toward him, feeling his warm, solid grip wrap around her wrist. With his other arm, he enveloped Emma, pulling her against his chest as he fought the current. The world around them faded to a murmur as Leela clung to Mark, fighting for every breath. The terror of drowning was still there, but now it was accompanied by a fierce will to survive. Mark kicked hard against the water, his muscles screaming in protest as he swam toward the riverbank. It felt like an impossible battle. Every stroke brought a mix of triumph and despair. He felt their combined weight, the life force of a mother and her child anchored to him, and it propelled him forward. He urged as the bank drew nearer, the muddy ground teasing their escape. Leela's heart raced, adrenaline fueling her as she held Emma tightly, whispering reassurances to her baby girl. "We're almost safe, Emma." With every ounce of strength he could muster, Mark pushed through the chilling water, fighting against the panic that threatened to engulf them. The roar of the river was deafening, the reality of their situation crashing down around him. Yet in that moment, he felt a fierce connection to the two lives he was desperate to save. Leela could feel the current fighting back, but she focused on the warmth of Emma nestled against her and Mark's unyielding grip. Hope started to blossom between the fear and chaos. She was alive, holding her daughter, and they were both fighting together. Finally, with one last surge of energy, Mark propelled them onto the bank. They tumbled onto the muddy ground, gasping for breath, their bodies shaking with the shock of what had just happened. Leela pulled Emma close, cradling her protectively, feeling the quick rise and fall of her tiny chest. "Thank God," she breathed, relief washing over her, drowning out the chaos of the river behind them. Mark lay beside them, chest heaving, feeling the adrenaline surge fade as reality set in. He turned to see Leela mud-streaked, soaked, yet alive. Her eyes sparkled with relief, and he felt a rush of joy mixed with disbelief. You saved us," Leela stammered, her voice quaking. The weight of the moment settled around them, thick and heavy, but also filled with gratitude. "I couldn't just stand there," Mark replied, his voice steady. Despite the exhaustion, he felt a surge of purpose pouring through him, a realization that sometimes, in the most chaotic moments, people find their true selves. They both took a moment to breathe, the world around them slowly coming back into focus. The distant sounds of laughter floated on the breeze, a stark contrast to the horror they had just faced. Leela looked down at Emma, whose blue eyes were wide, still processing the whirlwind they had just emerged from. Mark asked, glancing between mother and child, his heart racing at the thought that their struggle had been for naught. "She's perfect," Leela said, tears glistening in her eyes. She pressed her forehead against Emma's, grounding herself in the moment. "You're so brave, my sweet girl," she whispered, her heart swelling with love and unfathomable gratitude. Mark sat up, shaking off the water, feeling the sun on his face. He looked at the river and then back to Leela and Emma, a strange bond weaving between them in the aftermath of what they had just experienced. "You two are incredible," he laughed softly, both amazed and humbled by the resilience displayed in front of him. Leela looked up, meeting his gaze, the connection between them palpable. "Thank you for coming." Mark smiled, feeling the warmth of her gratitude wrap around him. "I'm just glad you're both okay now." "Let's get you home," he said, rising to his feet and offering a steady hand to Leela. Together, they helped each other up. Leela cradled Emma close, the warmth of her body flooding Leela with relief and love. As they walked along the riverbank, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows behind them. The day felt transformed. What had started as a calm and beautiful afternoon had morphed into a reminder of life's fragility. In that quiet moment, they realized how fleeting time could be, how close they had come to losing everything, yet how, in the face of adversity, they had found strength and resilience together. Leela said softly, looking up at Mark as they walked side by side, the air thick with unspoken emotions. "It does," Mark replied, glancing over at her. "But it also gives us moments that redefine who we are." Neither would Leela. As they continued along the river, the weight of what happened played heavily in their minds, intertwining with the unbreakable bond they had forged. They were not just a mother and her child, nor just a man who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. They were now part of each other's stories. Reaching a small clearing, Leela paused, glancing back at the river. It flowed steadily, a beautiful but relentless force of nature. "You think about how quickly everything can change," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded in agreement, soaking in the significance of her words. but it's also empowering. We faced it together and came out stronger. Together, Leela repeated, her heart swelling at the thought. As they continued their journey, the sun dipped below the horizon, intertwining their paths as though the universe itself had conspired to bring them together in that moment. That day was a turning point, not just for Leela and Emma, but for Mark as well. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected moments can transform our lives forever, teaching us about bravery and the enduring bonds we form in the face of uncertainty. And as twilight wrapped its arms around them, Leela and Mark walked forward, ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead, forever changed by that moment in the river where love and courage found a way to triumph against the odds. The sunlight glinted off the river, creating a mesmerizing dance of light that almost seemed to invite onlookers to come closer. Families gathered along the bank, laughing and splashing in the water. But beneath that shimmering surface, a storm was brewing, and in a matter of moments, everything would change. Leela stood at the edge, her heart heavy, yet full of hope. Cradled in her arms was her baby, Emma, a bundle of innocence with bright eyes that mirrored the sky. This walk was supposed to be their escape, a chance to breathe deeply and feel the warmth of the sun after weeks of turmoil. Leela had been navigating the choppy waters of motherhood alone following her recent divorce, often feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. But today, the river felt like a reset, a breath she desperately needed. "Look at the water, Emma," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Leela's gaze was fixed on the gentle ripples, trying to drown out the swirl of worries consuming her mind. This moment of bliss with her daughter could erase the heaviness, even if just for a while. But as Leela edged closer to the water, her foot slipped on the muddy bank. She teetered for a brief moment, a single moment where time lodged itself in place, and then gravity took hold. It moved as if in slow motion, and she felt herself fall, the ground slipping away beneath her. With a heart-stopping gasp, she clutched Emma tightly, pulling her closer as they both plunged into the frigid water. The shock hit like ice. Every nerve screamed with the jolt, and Leela struggled to find her footing. She kicked and flailed, desperately gasping for air, but the river was wild, its current a treacherous beast ready to drag them under. "No!" she cried out, but her voice was lost in the chaos, swallowed by the rushing water around them. Instinct took over as she focused on Emma, fighting to keep her baby's head above the swirling surface. Emma squirmed in her arms, scared and confused, the cries piercing through Leela's panic. Each moment stretched out like eternity, pulling her deeper into despair, and she felt the icy grip of fear tightening around her heart. Meanwhile, on the other side of the river, Mark had just finished a long day at work. He often came to the river to clear his mind. Tonight, the sun setting on the horizon was a sight that always calmed him. But then he heard it, a piercing scream that shattered the peace like glass. His heart raced as he sprinted toward the sound, his eyes scanning wildly until they landed on a horrifying sight. A woman and a baby struggling against the furious current. "Help!" Leela's voice faded, but the desperation echoed through Mark's mind. Without a second thought, he launched himself into the water, the cold enveloping him in an instant. The river roared around him, but Mark found himself moving without hesitation. Every stroke was fueled by the fierce urgency to save them. He pushed against the current, feeling his muscles burn, but there was no time for doubt or fear. "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice piercing through the rush of the river. Leela was losing hope. The cold water sapped her strength, and she felt her limbs growing heavy. Each breath she took was a battle, and she could feel the current trying to pull her deeper into its grasp. With her energy waning, her thoughts were frenzied. Would she lose everything? Her eyes darted around, desperate for a sign, when through the chaos she caught a glimpse of a silhouetted form cutting through the waves. She screamed again, voice cracking. In that moment, the very embodiment of hope burst forth, a man swimming fiercely toward them, determination etched on his face. Mark lunged forward, arms reaching out as he neared them. He shouted, urgency fueling his words. Leela's instinct kicked in. She outstretched her trembling hand, feeling the warmth of his grip as he grasped her wrist firmly. With a power she didn't know she had, she handed Emma off to him, watching as he secured the baby against his chest with the same urgency that had propelled him to dive in. Mark hollered, pulling them closer as he kicked hard toward the shore. The connection they formed in that single moment transformed chaotic survival into a united front against the merciless water. Leela felt the weight of hope surge within her, clinging tightly to Mark's wrist, fighting back the panic that had started to consume her. With every stroke, they advanced toward safety, each movement a testament to the will to live, the desire to protect the fragile life she held dear. Mark could feel the current pressing against them, fierce and unyielding. His muscles screamed for relief, but the purpose behind his effort coursed through him like fire. He thought of the lives at stake, Leela and Emma. He focused on the shore, the promise of safety just within reach. He urged, encouraging Leela to focus. It didn't matter how tired he felt or how hard the river fought back. They were making progress. With the adrenaline pulsing through her, Leela glanced at Emma, who had fallen silent, the baby's trusting gaze locking onto Mark. "We're almost there, sweet girl," Leela whispered, soothing the tiny body against her own. As they neared the bank, Mark felt a final surge of strength. With one powerful kick, he propelled them onto the muddy shore, collapsing onto the ground with Leela and Emma beside him. The trio tumbled, gasping for breath, the reality of what they had just escaped crashing down around them. Leela rolled onto her side, cradling Emma as tears of relief streamed down her face. Her heart raced as she took in the sight of her daughter, alive and safe. "We made it," she gasped, overwhelmed by gratitude as she pressed kisses to Emma's forehead. Mark lay beside them, breathless, staring up at the sky as he fought to process everything that had just occurred. "You both are okay," he managed, feeling a swell of joy and disbelief wash over him. "Thank you," Leela breathed, her voice trembling as she looked at him, eyes glistening. "I just did what anyone would do," he replied, though deep down, he knew that not everyone would have acted as he did. What he had faced was not just a physical challenge. It was a pivotal moment that would shape who he would become, a fierce protector. As they lay on the riverbank, slowly coming to terms with their escape from death, the distant sounds of laughter returned to the air, a reminder of the world that carried on, completely unaware of what had just transpired. Leela marveled at the miracle of life surging back through her. Emma stirred in her arms, pushing against her as if to break free, and Leela couldn't help but chuckle through her tears. "You're so brave," she said softly, wiping away the mud and water from Emma's face while holding her tightly. Mark sat up, shaking water from his hair, turning to look at Leela and Emma. "You two are incredible," he said with an almost reverent tone, feeling fortunate to have shared such a profound experience. But even in their relief, shadows of the day loomed around them. Leela felt the instinctual need to protect growing stronger, a realization that life was not just about surviving, it was about thriving. "Let's get you both home," Mark suggested, standing and offering his hand to help Leela up. In that moment, they stood together, looking into each other's eyes, a connection formed through fear, courage, and the beauty of survival. As they took a moment to breathe in the fresh air, the shifting currents of the river seemed to whisper promises of resilience, reminding them that they were bound not only by the experience, but by the heartbeats of those they loved. As they walked back along the shore, the colors of the sunset painted the sky, turning their world into a canvas of hope and possibility. The journey they had faced together etched its mark on their lives, steering them toward new paths filled with purpose and gratitude. Mark nodded, his eyes still fixed on the river. Leela paused, feeling the weight of his words. In that moment of vulnerability, they shared a piece of their souls, two people brought together by the unpredictable tides of life, forever changed by this unexpected encounter. As they reached the edge of the path leading back to where their lives awaited, Leela felt the warmth of the sun still lingering against her skin, a gentle reminder of their miraculous escape. She looked down at Emma, whose small hand wrapped around her finger, and in that touch she found solace. "Everything is going to be okay," Leela promised her baby, echoing the sentiment back to herself, embracing the truth she wished to hold close. "Yeah," Mark said quietly, glancing over. "You've got this." Leela smiled at him, warmth blossoming in her chest. "Neither will I," Mark replied, a newfound determination glinting in his eyes. and as they walked, the sun dipped lower, illuminating the water in shades of gold and crimson, signifying the end of one journey and the incredible beginning of another, filled with love, hope, and resilience. More than just a mother and her child, Leela and Mark had become part of each other's lives, forever intertwined by a moment when chaos turned into courage and life forged a new path in the wake of an unexpected storm. The sun hung high, casting a warm embrace over the tranquil river. Its surface shimmered like glass, weaving light and reflections into a mesmerizing dance. Families laughed as children splashed water, joy echoing across the shores. It seemed like any typical summer day. But on this ordinary afternoon beneath the glittering surface, a tempest was waiting to unfold. Leela stood near the water's edge, holding her little girl, Emma, securely in her arms. The infant's soft head rested against her shoulder, sleepy and content. Leela's heart swelled with love, each tiny breath of Emma a reminder of all that mattered. Her world had been shaken in recent months' divorce, sleepless nights, and a weight that felt suffocating. This trip to the river was supposed to be a retreat, a moment of joy amidst the chaos. "Look at the water, sweet girl," she whispered, tilting Emma ever so slightly. Leela felt a wave of peace, a brief pause in the swirling storm of life. But life, unpredictable and capricious, often has a way of shattering such moments. Without warning, the ground beneath her shifted. It was as if the earth had decided to relent just enough, sending a tremor through her body. She teetered, clutching Emma tightly, trying to find her balance. But every instinct screamed at her. The ground was slipping. With a heart-stopping jolt, the earth gave way beneath her feet. Everything slowed in that terrifying moment. Leela felt gravity pulling her down, and she instinctively wrapped her arms around Emma, holding her close. They plunged into the river, cold water enveloping them like a shroud. The shock of icy water squeezed the breath out of her, and panic surged through her veins. Leela gasped, struggling to keep Emma's head above the surface as they were both dragged under the roaring current. "Help!" she cried out, desperation pouring from her. But her voice was lost in the tumult of the swirling water. The river roared, a wild force that swallowed her screams. Her heart raced, drowning in fear as she kicked and fought against the current, desperately trying to keep her baby safe. Just a short distance away, Mark was out for his evening run, a routine he had come to cherish. The sound of his steady breath and the rhythmic pounding of his feet on the path calmed his mind after a busy week. But then, a scream shattered the tranquility. His heart dropped, an alarm ringing through him as he turned toward the sound. Horror struck him when he saw Leela and Emma, their tiny forms struggling in the water, rapidly being pulled downstream. "Help!" Leela's voice cut through the air, a cry for salvation that electrified Mark's heart. There was no time to think, only to act. Without hesitation, he dashed toward the river's edge, stripping off his shoes as he went. As he plunged into the water, a jolt of cold hit him like a wall, shocking him into full awareness. He could feel the powerful current working against him, but fear for the mother and child drove him forward. Each stroke felt like a fight against an unseen enemy, the frigid water wrapping around him with a merciless grip. He shouted, his voice barely piercing through the rushing water. The river was chaotic, a roiling beast, but Mark didn't falter. He swam harder, eyes fixed on Leela and Emma as they bobbed in the turbulent waves. He had trained for moments like this, always hoping he would never have to face them. But now he was here, a lifeline in the storm. Leela felt her strength draining with each passing second. The frigid flow of the river numbed her limbs, but her mind stayed focused on one desperate thought, Emma. She held her baby close, whispering soft reassurances, "Mommy's here." But the current, relentless and cruel, twisted around her, making her feel smaller and more vulnerable by the moment. She could feel herself sinking, fear curling in her gut, and then like an angel breaking through the storm, Mark emerged before her. He shouted, urgency punctuating his words. Their eyes locked. Time slowed for Leela as hope flickered in her chest. She reached out, extending her hand toward him. For a moment, everything else faded away, fear, pain, and uncertainty. In that shared connection, there was trust. Mark grasped her wrist firmly while wrapping his other arm around Emma, pulling the baby close as he used his legs to kick against the strong current. He shouted, his heart racing as they began to navigate the chaos of the river together. In that instant, Leela felt a swell of determination. The sheer act of survival surged within her as she clung to Mark's arm. He was their strength, their bridge to safety, and together they pushed against the fury of the water. "Just hold on," Mark called out, swimming with all his might. He felt the weight of their lives in his hands, and with every stroke he challenged the river, refusing to let it claim them. Leela focused on Emma, whose small face was pressed against Mark's chest. Each pulse of energy within her was anchored to the fragility of her baby's heartbeat. They fought together, daggers of fear devouring the edges of her mind as they moved toward the faint outline of the riverbank. Each inch forward felt monumental. The waves fought against them, but Mark's strength, his unwavering spirit, propelled them towards the shore. He shouted, urging them on, determination igniting a fire in his bones. Leela could feel hope blossoming as they drew closer, the muddy bank emerging from the darkness. She knew they were in this together, bound not just by fear but by an unspoken promise. With a final burst of adrenaline, Mark pushed them onto solid ground, tumbling out of the river, gasping for breath as they collapsed onto the wet leaves. Leela rolled onto her side, cradling Emma close, her heart racing as tears of relief streamed down her cheeks. "We made it," she whispered, alcohol of emotion leaching from her. She pressed kisses against Emma's forehead and felt the warmth of life, palpable and radiant. Mark lay beside them, panting heavily, yet relief coursed through him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He turned his head, taking in the sight of Leela and Emma alive, beaten but not broken. He managed, still trying to catch his breath. Leela nodded, her heart still fluttering with gratitude. "Thank you," she gasped, her voice shaking. "I just did what anyone would do," Mark replied. But deep down, they both knew how rare it was for someone to act in that moment of chaos. He felt an unfamiliar sense of purpose blooming within him, a realization that life often led to these unscripted chapters. As reality slowly settled around them like a soft blanket, the world felt as if it were awakening. The sounds of laughter from nearby picnics returned, the shouts of children splashing in the shallow end of the river blending with new life. Leela's gaze shifted to Emma, whose little hands began to flex and move. Relief washed over her like a cleansing wave. "You're okay, my love. Mommy is here," she said softly, wiping away tears. Mark smiled gently, the fatigue and adrenaline beginning to give way to warmth. They both shared an unspoken bond, now one forged in fear, courage, and the miracle of survival. The river had transformed from a menacing force to a witness of their strength, reminding them that sometimes chaos could lead to the most powerful connections. Mark asked, his eyes searching Leela's face, hoping to alleviate the weight she carried. "Yes, please," Leela agreed, glancing at the muddy mess they had become. But she felt light, as if the burdens from before were drifting away. They stood together, blinking against the evening sun, catching their breath as they made their way away from the river. Leela held Emma close, her heart pounding not just from the adrenaline but from gratitude for this unexpected hero who had stepped forward when chaos ruled. Today was supposed to be just another struggle, Leela admitted, absorbing the reality. Mark nodded, understanding. Sometimes it takes a moment like that to remind us what really matters. As they walked along the riverbank, side by side, Leela felt a sense of profound change settling within her. This day was marked not just by panic, but by hope, reminding them both that life's unpredictability could also offer moments of beauty. "Thank you for being there," she said, her heart swelling with emotion. "I'll never forget this either," Mark replied, looking ahead at the fading light. As the sun began to set, the sky morphed into a tapestry of pinks and oranges, reflections shimmering off the water's surface. Each step they took felt heavy with purpose, an understanding evolving between them. They drew closer to solid ground, and the tension started to dissolve into something different, an echo of resilience that would carry them forward. Leela felt lighter, largely due to the courage and strength of a stranger who had become an anchor in her life when the waters turned dark. "Emma and I will be okay," Leela said, glancing down at her daughter, whose eyes were fluttering with weariness. Mark smiled, his heart warmed by her words. As they reached the break in the river that led back to where their lives awaited, Leela turned to Mark, gratitude radiating from her. I hope you know how much your actions meant today." Mark shook his head, a humble smile on his face. "Just a person who did what needed to be done," he said, but inside he felt the flutter of pride, aware that he had contributed to something larger than himself. And in that moment, as they both stood at the edge of what had just transpired, they realized they were not just victims of circumstance but warriors. Through this harrowing encounter, they had fought and emerged stronger. As twilight descended, wrapping them in a soft embrace, Leela felt a sense of hope flowering within her. A new beginning formed from the chaos. She had faced the storm and found light, surrounded by the extraordinary power of connection. In the end, Leela knew it was more than survival. It was about what came after. Beneath the surface of their lives, something beautiful had taken root, reminding them of the importance of embracing the light amidst darkness. In that revelation, she found strength to carry on, not just for herself, but for Emma, and for the kindness of a stranger who had become a part of their story, forever intertwined by courage and love. The sun shimmered off the surface of the river, its golden rays bouncing like laughter across the water, deceiving those nearby into believing it was just another perfect summer day. Families played, children splashed, and everything seemed peaceful, until a moment changed everything. Leela stood at the water's edge, cradling her infant daughter, Emma, against her chest. The warm breeze gently tousled her hair, but the weight in her heart felt heavier than the sunny embrace of the day. The last few months had been filled with waves of uncertainty and loneliness following her recent divorce. Each day felt like a new battle, but on this day she had hoped for solace, a chance to breathe, even if just for a moment. "Look at the water, Emma," she whispered, tilting her head down where tiny fingers curled around her shirt. Emma's wide blue eyes sparkled as she gazed at the glimmering surface, and for a fleeting instant, Leela felt a bubble of joy rise within her, breaking through the weight of her worries. But tranquility can shatter with a single misstep. Without warning, the ground beneath Leela's feet crumbled. It was just a split second, but it felt like the world slowed down. She teetered, body expertly poised to protect her baby. But the earth beneath her shifted like quicksand, and before she realized what was happening, she lurched forward. Gravity took hold in an instant. Leela fell backward into the icy grip of the river, clutching Emma tight as they both plunged into the shock of freezing water. The cold was a brutal awakening. It clawed at her skin, jarring her senses into stark reality. Panic surged as they sank beneath the surface. Leela gasped, fear clawing at her throat. Desperation coursed through her as she fought to keep her baby's head above the gushing torrent. Flailing, she struggled for air, the desperate cries of her daughter ringing in her ears. "Help!" she screamed, but the roaring rush of the river swallowed her voice. While Leela and Emma battled the merciless current, Mark was out for his evening jog along the river. The rhythmic pounding of his feet against the earth had become second nature, a meditation that cleared his mind. That's when he heard it, a piercing scream soaring over the sounds of nature, a raw cry that shattered the tranquil scene. His heart twisted painfully as he whipped around, eyes scanning the water, and then he spotted them, two tiny figures, a mother and her baby, bobbing helplessly in the raging river. Time froze and every instinct within him ignited. He shouted, the words bursting forth like a battle cry. Without waiting for a second thought, Mark plunged into the river, the shock of the cold biting into him like ice. He kicked against the current, propelling himself towards Leela and Emma, every stroke a fierce act of will. The cacophony of the river rose around him, a roar that enveloped everything, but all he could see was their struggle. "Hold on," he yelled, the urgency in his voice mingling with the sounds of rushing water. Leela felt the icy grip tightening, draining her strength, pulling them deeper. She gasped for breath as the cold coursed through her, and for a brief moment, reality slipped away. Emma's soft cries pierced through her haze of panic. "I'm here, baby." Leela's voice trembled, yet she fought to remain a protector amidst chaos. Just as despair crept in, a figure broke through the surface, the man closer now, his movements powerful and determined. Leela's heart surged with a flicker of hope. Mark shouted. Instinct kicked in. Leela reached out, desperation propelling her forward. Their hands met, a lifeline forged through instinct and urgency. Mark secured Emma against his chest, pulling her to him with a protective grip, anchoring her in safety as Leela latched onto his wrist. Mark urged, still swimming furiously against the current, adrenaline pushing him forward as he kicked hard, his muscles aching with every stroke, every ounce of his being focused on their escape. Leela felt hope sparking within her like a flame igniting in the dark. With every pull, every kick, they battled together against the furious river, a newfound alliance born of necessity. Mark shouted, the words bolstering Leela's resolve as they moved toward the bank. As they swam to the shore, time twisted. Each moment stretched into eternity, the river pulling at them, ferocious and unyielding. Leela knew she had to remain focused. Emma pressed against Mark's side, and Leela's heart swelled with fierce determination. Finally, with a final surge, Mark propelled them onto solid ground. They tumbled onto the shore, gasping for air, their bodies shaking with the shock. Leela pulled Emma tightly, finally feeling that fragile warmth against her chest. She cried, tears of relief spilling down her cheeks as she looked down at her daughter, clinging tightly to her, alive and breathing. Mark lay beside them, panting heavily, feeling reality settle in. "You're both okay," he managed to say, his own heart racing as he processed what they had just overcome. "Thank you," Leela gasped, her voice trembling, awash in gratitude as she looked at him. "I just did what anyone would do," Mark replied, but inside a realization stirred. Not everyone would have acted, not everyone would have pushed aside their fear. Something profound had awakened within him that day, a calling to be part of something larger, something vital. As the serene sounds of the world began to wash back in, Leela slowly caught her breath, the weight of the moment settling in her heart. The relief began to wash over her, yet it was tinged with lingering shock. The distant laughter from families nearby, and the juxtaposition of their joy against the ordeal they had just faced tugged at Leela's emotions, making her feel both grateful and vulnerable. Mark looked at Emma, nestled against Leela, who was still slowly registering what had just happened. He asked, his voice gentle and filled with concern. "She's perfect," Leela replied, brushing her tears away as she gazed at her daughter's small face. Emma was wide-eyed, as if trying to comprehend the world anew. Mark nodded, relief flooding through him, but his heart remained heavy with the gravity of the moment. He realized that life is fragile, a balance between moments of joy and moments of terror, and how quickly one could slip into the other. "We should probably get you two cleaned up," he suggested, glancing at the river and the remnants of mud smeared across their bodies. "Yeah," Leela chuckled softly, her nervous laughter mingling with disbelief. But she couldn't take her eyes off him, the stranger who had become her savior in what felt like moments of impending tragedy. They rose to their feet, incoherent shivers running through them both, yet an invisible thread now bound them together, a connection forged in desperation and the fierce instinct to survive. As they began to walk along the riverbank, Leela turned to look back at the water, the very same river that had moments ago threatened to take everything from her, now glimmering in the soft glow of sunset. "I was just looking for a moment of peace," she said softly, her voice almost lost among the sounds of life returning around them. Mark walked beside her, reflecting on everything that had just unfolded. "It's funny how quickly everything can change," he replied, eyes still fixed on the water. "Funny isn't the word I'd use," Leela said, her eyes narrowing humorously, but deep down she felt a strange sense of relief wash over her like a tide. They paused at the water's edge, the sky painted with purples and oranges. "This moment will change our lives forever," she mused, glancing at Mark. Mark opened his mouth to reply when suddenly he heard a rustling in the bushes behind them. It was a sudden, sneaky sound, like a silent predator slinking through the shadows. His instincts kicked in. He shouted, heart racing, as he spun around. Before he could even see what it was, a large black shape lunged from the brush, its eyes wild and fierce. Startled, Leela jumped back, holding Emma close as the creature came barreling toward them, something primal, something they hadn't anticipated. Mark stepped forward instinctively, eyes wide, adrenaline surging through his veins once again. He yelled, his voice steady as he faced the unexpected threat. In that moment, as everything shifted from survival in the water to facing a new danger on land, The atmosphere crackled with tension. Their day turned on its head, yet again. Would they have to fight not just for survival in the river, but now against nature, still clinging to a thread of hope that had recently been forged? As the creature emerged from the shadows, both Leela and Mark realized that sometimes, facing the storm requires not just courage but an unwavering belief that they could navigate the chaos together. And in that moment, the story was far from over.